Starting Pathologic 2, The Marble Nest, you, Daniil Dankovsky, also known as the Bachelor, awake in a small room, seemingly having risen from the coffin behind you. A tall bird-like creature stares up into your window from outside, patiently waiting. Stepping out of your macabre quarters, you are greeted by a mysterious woman, Ispidi, who ponders if when you greet death downstairs you'll make the correct choice this time around. But you have no intention of dying. You are, after all, a doctor, and fighting death is all you know. The plague has nearly taken the entire town, and yet, despite your best efforts to quarantine the infection, you see that people are still succumbing to it. She claims that you have fought the wrong enemy. You want to exterminate death, yet you drag it behind you like a tethered bull. Making your way downstairs, you are greeted by your mysterious figure, simply known as the Executor. You have fought valiantly, but you've lost. Are you ready to die? It asks. No, you respond. You are resilient. So long as this plague persists, you will not resign yourself to an easy death. Unamused, the Executor comments on your lack of understanding. You have learned nothing. Everything you have done in order to fight off this plague has been in vain, and now he is here for you. This is a dream, nothing more than a nightmare, you respond. But a prophetic one, it says. Somewhere in the town, despite all signs suggesting otherwise, a carrier of the plague has breached your impenetrable fortress. Come noon, the fleas and the rats, carriers all of them. By night, the town will have completely succumbed to it. And yet, it says, you've seen this many times already. Resistance is pointless. Are you ready to die, Bachelor? It asks once more. No, you set off to find the plague. If it has escaped your grasp and control before, it won't this time. You make sure of it. The Executor disappears, and you step outside, almost immediately losing consciousness. Coming to in the morning, you were awakened back inside your residence by a young boy named Sticky. He tells you that his friend's father has fallen ill, but is insistent that it isn't the plague. You step outside and begin your search. If the Executor is correct, somewhere in this part of the town, a plague carrier is still hiding, and perhaps Sticky's claims are worth investigating. And this is where the game really begins. You have one day to get to the bottom of this before the plague can continue to spread. You are otherwise given a single starting point from which you can decide to follow up on, but may otherwise speak with the townsfolk for further leads. However, as you speak with people around the town, more and more problems begin to arise. Firstly, immediately outside of your residence, an orderly, strongly resembling the Executor, tells you that thanks to your efforts, the plague has seemingly been successfully quarantined in this part of the town, and as a result, many of the orderlies have simply left, despite your protests of a hidden carrier. There may be a carrier in town, but we can't just let the other orderlies abandon their posts now, can we? Making our way across the town, we find the orderlies in question. Speaking with their chief, they are at first surprised. According to that of the local judge, Georgi Kane, you, Bachelor Dankovsky, passed away in your bed last night, the only known victim of the sand plague in the district. Kane, in your alleged passing, thusly cancelled the quarantines you had placed. Time to speak with Judge Kane. But along the way, we stop to talk with a guard outside of a house who explains that he had just taken lockpicks from a group of children who had tried to break into the house. With no use for the lockpicks, he gives them to us. Not too far away, the children can be found, Sticky being amongst them. The girl beside him, Shrew, asks us to bring her nuts in exchange for rare items, more lockpicks being amongst them. But in speaking to Sticky again, he warns us not to give the nuts to Shrew. He claims that nuts can be used to preserve people after they die, and in giving the nuts to Sticky will surely mean we are preventing our own death, something Sticky would much prefer. Despite the odd superstition, we give the nuts to Sticky in exchange for some bandages. The last child in the group, Sleepyhead, says that inside the house, 2 infected people are locked up. But, in my everlasting genius, I make way for Kane. Approaching the cathedral and crossing the street, we enter the home of the judge, who explains his views on the plague. A plague is just a type of death to you, but to me it's essentially an exam, and one must not run away from exams forever. Sooner or later one must take them. He recounts on the construction of the town, specifically referring to the polyhedron, an impossible structure that seemingly defies the rules of gravity residing within the town. Kane states that for the town's attempts to reach beyond those logical boundaries of other towns, that perhaps a divine intervention is placed in examination upon the town. And as he previously said, unlike death, an examination can be passed. But at this point in time, half the town's population has been killed by the plague. In frustration and getting nowhere with Kane, we leave him to his madness. A laundry list of tasks have begun to form throughout the day. The mystery of the hidden carrier is our most pressing issue, but as you work your way through these different conversations, it would seem that tracking down the carrier is becoming the least of your worries. Talking with Kane and going down the rabbit hole of why the orderlies have abandoned their watch only leads to a dead end, and with only a single day left to your devices, each minute is precious. Near the cathedral, a store has been closed, leaving many of the townsfolk angry at the inability to get supplies and food for themselves. You can speak with the town committee to open the shop back up, but will likely find that due to the plague, the cost of even the most basic of items will be dramatically overinflated, leaving what money you do find to be nearly useless. You, as you are currently within the confines of this plague-infested town, are no less susceptible to it than the other townsfolk that live there. Simply getting to the bottom of the plague is only half of the game's battle. At its core, Pathologic is a game about survival. Most food in the game will do little to ease your hunger bar, leaving you in a constant struggle to balance out taking care of yourself and taking care of your various tasks throughout the day. At another end of the town, you can find the drugstore. Closed off and watched by a guard, a boy asks for you to convince the guard to go in for an inspection and to smuggle out any items from a broken window within the building, as he's looking for medication to send to his aunt across town. Fooling the guard appears easy enough, and we step inside. With a brief look around, a decent number of useful items can be found. Bandages, morphine, immunity boosters, and so forth. But stepping into the back room, a box catches our attention. And inside, the panacea, the cure to the sand plague, created by the main game's protagonist Artemi Burak before his passing. Forget everything else, we have a cure! But of course, the guard outside won't let us take any items with us. Heading upstairs to the broken window, we dump the items below, make our way out past the guard after a brief inspection, and return to the boy who has caught all of our items. All of our items, of course, except for the panacea, which did not survive the fall. This is probably one of the most devastating moments of the Marble Nest. Maybe it's foolish of the player to assume that something like that could be given to us so easily, but now without the cure, we're brutally reminded of our other tasks. Taking a look at my current leads, I am suddenly reminded that after all this time, I have completely failed to look into the very first thing I was told to do by Sticky. Rushing over to his friend's home, I find the body of his father, having passed away sometime earlier in the day. We ask how the man died, and we receive our answer. This man died of your negligence. Due to my other tasks, I had completely failed to save the one person who I knew from the very beginning was sick. In my growing frustration, I leave the house. Having wasted far too much time, I make my way back to the locked house, but to my surprise I am greeted by Shrew. Frustrated that we gave the nuts to Sticky instead of her, she says that at this current time, we're sick in bed, feverish, and unconscious. It's midnight and I am delirious. This is a hallucination. But I don't feel sick at all, we tell her. In fact, she's the one that appears delirious. Worried that in the event of my supposed sickness that I pass, Shrew evidently only wished for the nuts to preserve me in death. But casting her and her nut superstitions aside, we enter the building. And there we have them at last, the carriers, Lotman and Siskin. Lotman tells us that there is nothing to be afraid of, but furious, we ask why they had to hide. Do they even realize what they've done in breaking the quarantine? But he insists they won't be leaving. They are almost well again. You're lying, this is the sand pest, it's incurable. As the infection takes them, the pain will subside in death. Look at my sister, look how much better she feels now. She can almost keep her head up, can almost stand. We speak with Siskin next. You must be thinking that you can't leave this place now, but don't let it get to you, she says. Damn, she's right. No doubt finding these two has led to my own infection. Aren't you scared at all? We ask. Indeed, death may feel horrible, but it's not the end. Fear nothing and be on your way, kind doctor. But as we leave, perhaps we find some morbid satisfaction in the encounter. After all, we have found what we were looking for this whole time. Stepping outside, we find one of the orderlies we'd encountered before. Nothing is over yet. This is just the beginning, he says. A message he claims he was told to relay to you. Told by whom? We deal in death, Bachelor. We have our own sources. Some of them on the other side. We step past the orderly and back towards town. The sky is darkened, the bonfires have been lit, and the plague has now infected this part of the town like a dark cloud. We can hear the rats skittering about and cries of the infected in the distance. Those that remain quietly wander the streets, as if aimlessly waiting for the plague to claim them next. And so it seems that's what we are doing ourselves. We found the carriers, but now with the rest of the town infected, what is there to do? All we can do is wander and wait, feverishly searching the town for any sign of help, a cure, anything. All the while, with the passing time, our hunger, thirst, and exhaustion grows, while our resistance to the plague dwindles with every moment. The dead begin to litter the streets, and in my growing anxiety, it doesn't take me long to wish I could loot the corpses for even the smallest amount of food. Instead, I take my remaining lockpicks and begin searching through what houses I can for even the most basic of supplies. However, as the final hours of the day approach, church bells begin to echo through the town as I arrive near my residence, the crows all in a frantic screech. A crowd is gathered outside the house. "Did you come to pay respects?" the herb bride asks. "Pay respects to whom?" "Daniil Dankovsky, a doctor from the capital, passed away in this house an hour ago." "What? But I am Dankovsky, that can't be right." We step through the house, tracing our steps back to where we first began the day's journey. The executor awaits us once more. The coffin where we once awoke from, now a crib. He asks us again, "Are you ready to die?" We mock the executor instead. "Enough. You've had enough time to put yourself and your actions in perspective. Your thoughts keep coming back to your very last day time and again as if you were trying to fix something. But in reality, you are lying here, delirious, clinging to the naive hope that this terrible house is a product of your imagination, a prophetic nightmare." "So then, that must mean that when Sticky awoke us that morning, you once again refused to die and plunged into a new loop of your deathbed derangement. Everything but this house is a product of your imagination, but now you are finally coming to. There's only one step left to make to leave the illusion behind and embrace reality. I'm afraid I'll have to be insistent. So I repeat, are you ready to die?" We take a moment to collect our thoughts and accept. You chose freedom. Congratulations. And the game ends without fanfare. You are booted back to the main menu, and that is it. Or is it? What were to happen if I discovered Lotman and Siskin earlier? What if I had done things differently? What if I refused the executor? To do either of those things would be missing the point of the game. Recall back to the imagery at the start and end of the game, the coffin in the cradle. Starting the game over, we awake in a coffin. This is a timeline in which we have time and again refused the executor's call and have thus emerged from death, starting over to repeat the day once more. The crib at the end being a symbol of our rebirth, should we refuse it again. The Marble Nest is thus telling the story of a cycle, one of which seems doomed to play out eternally in the mind of the bachelor until he realizes that finding the carriers isn't what matters. It's accepting his own death. People repeatedly tell you throughout the game that you are dying, that today is your last day, and that you have already passed away. You can start over, grab the lockpicks right off the bat, and find Lotman and Siskin within minutes if you know what you are doing, but remember what Aspidi tells you from the beginning of the game. You have fought the wrong enemy. Despite what the bachelor thinks, finding the sick isn't the point. It's for you to accept that you are already dead. Likewise, you can tell the executor right from the beginning of the game that you are prepared to die, but in doing so, you will have failed to have learned anything from the day's events. While the ending hardly offers anything pleasant to the player after all their struggles, the final reward, as the executor says, is freedom. You come full circle, accept your fate, and as you were told from the beginning, pass away in your bed. And yet, this is only the beginning. The Marble Nest is merely a short, standalone story to the main game, one which does not require any knowledge of the main game or Pathologic 1. Whatever we suffer through here in this short 1 to 3 hour adventure, which covers only a single day of the plague, is exponentially worse in Pathologic 2, the main game, which instead covers 12. These are games that challenge your survival skills to its absolute limits, and overcoming its various challenges could hardly be considered fun, but rather a gauntlet of endurance. At the risk of using an overused cliché, this isn't quite like Dark Souls, where with each challenge you pass, the fact that you did so feels like a reward on its own. Pathologic instead forces the players to trudge along, clawing your way through, fighting tooth and nail to ensure your survival in this hostile environment. And no matter how hard you try, you simply cannot save everybody. But if this sort of masochism excites you, please do consider giving the game a shot on Steam. It's considerably cheaper than the average full retail cost of a new game, yet the developers have reported poor sales figures for Pathologic 2, and it would certainly be a shame to see them go under as a result. If you've never played Pathologic 2 or The Marble Nest, or even the original Pathologic 1 for that matter, I do hope this narrative-style look at the game has piqued your interest somewhat. But tell me, what are your thoughts on Pathologic 2 and The Marble Nest? Let me know in the comments below. And with that, thanks for listening to my long and hopefully cohesive rant on a game I enjoy, and I'll see you all in the next video.